Well, hey everybody. Welcome to Celebration Bar Review and to our live Facebook broadcast, as well as probably going to turn this into a podcast episode, so you might be just listening to it rather than watching. But I'm glad you're with me. My name is Jackson Mumey, for those of you that don't know me, and hopefully you can see me and hear me, and I would love if you do have the ability to see and hear. If you just type into your comments box in your Facebook feed that you can see and hear, that would be great. Also want to let you know that somewhere on your device you should see a little button in the lower right hand corner that says follow. If you click on that, you'll be notified when we're doing future live broadcasts, and I plan to do a fair number of these as we're going along. We're in the bar exam results season, and boy, it's been a busy week. There's a lot still to come this week, and so I wanted to talk about all of that. But today, I actually have a fairly provocative title for you, and it's really the 5 groups of people who are never going to pass the bar exam and how you can avoid being in those groups. Now, I also have to tell you that for whatever strange reason, just before I started, it sounds like a dentist moved in downstairs, and you can hear the drill, and I apologize for that. Weird, but there you go. In any event, kind of like going to the dentist is the group of people who go to take the bar exam, and they're just never going to pass it. And over and again, they're going to try and try and try, and they're going to continue to fail. And I hate that for anybody. And so while that sounds like a really harsh topic to be using, in reality, I want you to stay out of these groups. So I'm going to discuss today 5 groups of people that, in my experience, fail the bar over and over again. And I'm also going to tell you how you can get out of those groups if you happen to be in one of them. So if I describe a group and you are part of that group, I don't want you to get flustered. I don't want you to go, oh man, he's just so negative and nobody, I don't want to hear that. I got it. I just want you to think about what I'm telling you is necessary to get out of that group. So if you're able to hear and see me, by all means type in. If you've got comments or questions, type those in as well, and be sure to click on the follow button so that you can get future notifications when we're doing these live broadcasts. Well, let's jump in and talk about these 5 groups and how you can stay out of them. Here's group number 1 of people who will never pass the bar exam. And this is not going to make me any friends, but people who do not write, speak, or read English. They're not going to pass. Now, I recognize that there are many of you who are foreign trained attorneys who are taking the bar exam, who are learning English, who are trying your hardest to get good at English. But here's the reality. If you can't write and read and understand and speak English, you are never going to pass the American bar. I mean, the places where you can take it are really limited to, right now, New York, California, Texas, Georgia, Florida, if you're from Puerto Rico. And in all of those jurisdictions, when I work with people who literally can't speak English, who just struggle horribly with their English, it doesn't matter how hard they're working, it doesn't matter how many hours they're putting in, it doesn't matter how intelligent they are, they will never pass the U.S. bar exam. And frankly, if you've got any doubt about that, all you really have to do is watch the politics in this country right now and the extraordinary amount of xenophobia we've got. There is no mercy given by the bar examiners in any jurisdiction for poor grammar, for language problems, for an inability to understand cultural norms. Is that right? Should it be that way? It's not for me to say. I would like to see us be more tolerant, I think, but the reality is that the examiners are not tolerant. And so, for example, if when you're writing your bar essays, you can't keep subject, verb, tenses together, if you're using past tense and future tense in the same sentence, if you can't keep singular and plural nouns separate, if your grammar indicates that you clearly don't know the way to use phrasing and participles, if you've got difficulty with language, just picking the right words, those things will destroy your ability to take the bar exam and to be successful on it. And I don't care how hard you work, you simply won't get through it. And sometimes I think there are people that think, well, they should let me take the bar exam in Spanish, for example. Well, that'd be great, except you can't. And so as a result, you have to work in English. So if you cannot speak, read, or write English, forget it. Don't take the bar exam right now. What should you do to get out of that group? Well, I think there are a couple of things. One is enroll in a college-level English course. It is not enough to just read some books or listen to people or try to pick it up sort of casually. It's not going to work. You need to go and take, I think, at least a college-level English course. And an English for Speakers of Other Languages course, frankly, isn't sophisticated enough for the kind of work that you have to do. So I think you've got to take that time, and it might mean a semester, it might mean a year, but you've definitely got to do that. The second thing I think you've got to do is you've got to put yourself in what I describe as the English-only bubble. You need to speak English, you need to read English, you need to write English, you need to think in English, you need to dream in English. And if you're in a position, as many people are, where they can live in a ethnic community and not have to speak English, even if they're in the United States, or if you live abroad and you're coming to the US to take the bar, you are in deep trouble until you get yourself in the English bubble and start learning how to work in English, read English, and write English. There are some great books available on reading and speaking and writing English for lawyers. One of the best is called Culture to Culture by Jill Ramsfield. We'll list to that in our show notes on the podcast. But there are a number of resources that you can use. There's also the book The Elements of Style by Strunk and White. It's a great primer on English writing. And you need to get better at those things. Look, if you're not able to speak English comfortably, if you can't read English, and if you can't write English, sit out of the bar exam for a while until you're more proficient in those things. Because frankly, in my experience, and right now, given everything that's going on in the bar and in the country generally, you just don't have a chance. So that's kind of bleak for number one, but the truth is, with time and practice, you can get out of that group if you're in that group to start with. So that's our first group. Well, the second group is kind of an opposite extreme. I mean, the foreign trained attorneys I've met tend to be very hard workers, very diligent. But there's another group of people who are just wildly arrogant. And I suspect most of them aren't listening to this because they're so smart and they're so confident that they don't feel like they need it. But basically, it's the person who thinks that they can pass the bar if they just cram for a week or two before the test. And they just do a little bit of studying. Typically, this is an older attorney who remembers or kind of misremembers what the process was like, and they tend to say something like, you know, back when I took the bar, all I had to do was I checked into a hotel a few nights before the test, I read some books, and I showed up and took the exam and I passed. Well, that's true. I mean, 40 years ago, I think you could do that in a lot of jurisdictions. Today, that is not possible, and if that is the group that you're in, you'll fail. You'll fail 100% of the time, and you'll wonder what hit you, because it's a different world. And you simply can't cram for just a week or two, or a night or two, or a weekend before the test. Now, along with that group of people, there are those who simply refuse to schedule their study time. What I mean is, these are the people who say, well, I'm going to study about 10 hours or 15 hours or 20 hours or whatever it is per week, but I refuse to put it into a schedule. I'm not going to write it down. I'm not going to commit myself to it. I'm not going to be accountable to it. I'll just study when I can. Hey, look, folks, nobody wants to study for the bar exam. Nobody gets up in the morning typically and says, oh boy, I get to study for the bar today. And the reality is, if you think that you're going to be able to just casually study, that somehow magically the moment will hit you and you'll go, oh, I guess I should study today for 5 hours. That isn't going to happen. This must be intentional. And if you're not intentional about the way you study, if you're not putting in the hours and the work and being accountable, and we've talked about that in other places in our podcasts recently where we talked about accountability and measurement, but if you're not doing those things, you will never pass the bar. I promise you that you cannot, for this second group, you cannot casually stroll into the bar exam and pass it. It just isn't going to happen. And all of those brilliant old partners who wander through your office and go, you know, I don't know what the problem is because it was so easy when I took the bar back in, you know, whenever. Really? It isn't that world anymore. And if you think you can live in that world and pass this bar exam, you're delusional and you're never going to pass. And so the way you get out of it is you start scheduling your time and you study for a prolonged period of time. Now, right now, as we're talking, we're less than 90 days to the next bar exam. That's enough time to study, but for most of you, it's going to take about 300 hours of total study time. So take the number of days until the exam, divide that into 300, and that tells you what you've got to do, and then commit to that and get yourself out of that group of people who are going to fail. Our third group of people who are going to fail are the people who are kind of at the opposite end of the spectrum from group number 2. These are the people that have 60-hour-a-week plus jobs. I mean, they're critically important. Maybe they're running their own firm, or maybe they're doing some work that's it's God's work. It's critical, and it's massive, and it's terribly important. And if they don't do it, life on the planet will end. Could be. I mean, maybe it's Captain America and Iron Man. I don't know. These are also the same people that have typically 3 children that they're responsible for, and they have an unsupportive spouse. If you're one of those people who's working a full-time job, and you have children, and you have home responsibilities, and you're not getting help at home from a spouse or a neighbor or a friend or somebody or a relative, you're going to fail. You're going to fail the bar every single time. For the same reason as the group in number 2, you're simply not able to put in the time it takes to be successful on the bar. Look, I have all the admiration in the world for moms, single moms in particular, who are working, supporting their families, raising their kids, and studying for the bar. It is admirable. But I have to tell you that if you're in that group, you've got to get help. You have to go get daycare help. You have to get family help. You have to send the kids off to summer camp. You have to cut back your hours at work. You cannot do it all. The idea of being a superhero to study for the bar is really something that Marvel Comics could come up with. Bar taker. I don't know. I'm sure there's a cape for it. But in reality, it just doesn't happen. And so if you're trying to juggle full-time job, full-time family, no help, don't take the bar. Sit out. Wait. You're not going to pass. You will never get in the hours that you need. And I know that some of you are like, oh, that's such a downer. I mean, why wouldn't he encourage me? I wouldn't encourage you because it's a waste of time. The bar exam is not amenable. It's not susceptible right now to people who are not able to put all of their chips on the table, who are not able to go all in. And so this concept that you can do a little bit of study and a little bit of family and a little bit of work means that you're lousy at work, you're lousy at home, and you're lousy in study. And that's just the truth. And if it's too painful to hear, I'm sorry, but it doesn't have to be that way. You simply have to make the choices about what is most important. And if your job or your family or your spouse or whatever comes ahead of the bar, then that's fine. But for some season, the bar will have to move way up on the list in order for you to have the time to study. And so when people tell you, oh, well, you can do it all, just raise the kids, and when they're taking their hour-and-a-half nap each day, you'll study, not going to happen. It's just not going to happen. So that's our third group. I'm Debbie Downer today, aren't I? I'm sorry. Well, group number 4 will just irritate most of you that are watching, because I can almost bet most of you are going to buy into this. I've talked about it in other places. One of the groups of people that will never pass the bar are the people who try to memorize, whose entire strategy for the bar exam is, I'm going to memorize all the law. Here's why. Number 1, you can't do it. I have never in 25 years met anyone who told me, my great strength is that I can memorize everything. Never heard it. I've never heard it. In fact, I hear the opposite all the time. I'm not very good at memorization. And yet those same people then go and say, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to work on learning how to memorize. Why? It's not the skill that's tested on the exam. It's not rewarded on the exam. It doesn't have any basis in reality. It's just the mythology that you've heard about how to pass, and it's got no real connection to what works or doesn't work. Listen, I know some of you out there in the world, and some of you listening and watching this are going to be saying, yes, but that's what they taught me at Barbary and Kaplan and Themis and on and on and on and on. Good, that's great. By the way, have you noticed the pass rates for the overall states in those jurisdictions? Let's see, New Jersey was 51%, Florida was 29%, New York was in the low 30s, California's coming out later this week, it'll probably be in the low 30s. Most people take those courses, most people try to memorize, most all of them fail. Memorization is not a successful method. And the The real killer, beyond the fact that you can't memorize everything, is that even if you could, the examiners always have one more opportunity to test something that you didn't know was coming. Case in point in Florida, where the examiners picked 3 essays on subjects that they either had never tested or had only rarely tested in 20 years. If you were trying to memorize in anticipation of those subjects, well, you didn't do it. You couldn't do it. And so we went to fewer than 600 people passing the bar in February 2016 in Florida because you simply couldn't memorize and prepare for the exam. Now, having said that, what do you do if you were a memorizer? Well, I think you've got a couple of options. One of them certainly is to learn the law. You need to know the law, but knowing the law comes from understanding how to use it in context. And we talk about that on our free webinar, How to Make the Next Bar Exam Your Last Bar Exam. Lots of information about that on our website, and we'll link up to it as well. But the reality is that you can learn the law through reading, lectures, question practice over time in small bits and pieces much more effectively than you'll ever memorize anything. And if you've been thinking about memorizing and memorizing and memorizing, you're really wasting your time and your energy. And frankly, well, I guess I'm exaggerating a little when I say you'll never pass if you memorize. The odds are so against you if that's your strategy for the bar exam that I might as well say you'll never pass. It's just not going to work. And yet it's a pervasive myth. So I just want to tell you that if your goal here over the next 90 days is to memorize like crazy, I'll see you in February. The odds are on my favor. I'll see you in February because it won't work. And you've got to get out of that mindset. You've got to start learning instead of memorizing. And I don't care what you did in law school. This is not law school. The practice of law is never memorization. And really, folks, I mean, just think about it. Those of you that are in practice or around lawyers, they don't memorize anything. It's not part of the skill set that's required anymore. And so I think you want to be really careful about staying out of that group. So that's our fourth group of people who aren't going to pass, people that memorize. How do you get out of it? You stop memorizing, you start learning and studying in a way that's a little more effective and more appropriate to the test that you're taking. And then our fifth group, our final group of people who are never going to pass the bar until they make a change, are the people that keep using the same system of study even after repeated failures. I mean, this is the classic definition of insanity. They do the same thing over and over and over again, and they expect a different result, and it's not going to happen. The reality is that if you tried the drill and kill, memorize, cram approach to the bar, and you failed, and you do it again and again and again and again, you'll fail over and over and over until you stop and change and do something different. Now, I'm not saying we're the only people that have an insight into how to pass the bar exam. I mean, I've done pretty well over 25 years. I've beaten the state odds across all the states for years and years and years. But it's by no means exclusive. I'm simply saying that whatever people are doing when they're just following the herd and getting the same bad results over and over again, folks, you got to stop. You got to break out of the cycle. You got to go do something different in order to get a different result. Now, is that a little scary? I suppose, maybe. But is it any scarier than just going in week after week or year after year, exam after exam, knowing that you're going to get the same result? Your score is going to stay about the same. You're studying the same way. You're trying to memorize. You're trying to analyze the MBE. You're issue spotting and doing IRAC writing in your essays. You're trying to use attack outlines. If you've been doing those things and it has not been successful, you're going to continue to fail. And the reality is you have to change what you're doing. So I really encourage you to make that change, to have the courage to change, whether it's to come to us, go somewhere else, do something else. But don't keep repeating the errors over and over again. Well, those are our 5 things, 5 groups that I think are never going to pass the bar. If you can't speak, read, or write in English, you're not going to pass. If you think you can pass by just cramming a week or 2 before the test or refusing to get around to scheduling your studies, you're not going to pass. If you've got a full-time plus job, plus family, plus other commitments, plus no help at home, you're not going to pass. If you're putting all your eggs into the memorization basket, you're not going to pass. And if you keep using the same failed system of study that you've been using, you're not going to pass. you got to break out of those things, and I hope you'll do that. We'd love to talk with you if any of those things make sense. I think there's great hope. We see people passing who had failed over and over and over again in all of these jurisdictions, so we know it can be done. It's simply a matter of changing your perspective. Well, that's my message for today. I hope you found it useful. Do invite you at the very bottom of the screen there. You'll see a button that says follow. Click on that. You'll be notified in the future when we're doing these live broadcasts. If you're following us on the podcast, we hope you'll subscribe and join us there. Love to get your comments, on the podcast and on the show notes, or by going to our Facebook group and our Facebook page and letting us know what you think. For now, I'm going to sign off. Thanks for being with me today. It's been fun. And we'll see you again soon for another episode when we come back and talk a little bit more, probably right after the California results come out. Bye for now.